With us, I want to now bring in NBC News legal analyst Danny Ceballos and former federal prosecutor Julie Grohovsky. She's now a partner at Cohen Seglius. Danny, let's start with you. You've been with us throughout this trial. Most mornings you are with us, and I just want to hear your reaction to the case the prosecutors made, their victory here in convincing the jurors to convict on all 3 counts, and just kind of how the process went, those 10 hours.
No surprises on either side. The prosecution marched through each of the elements and even provided a chart for the jurors. So no real surprises in closing arguments on either side. But the real surprise is the jury deliberation. Not a note came out to the judge despite these complicated legal issues and 2 charges of murder that we all have been raised thinking, well, murder is an intentional killing. These were admittedly not intentional killings. So some complicated issues. Then you combine the most complicated issue in this case, which was causation. Did Derek Chauvin's knee, was it the legal cause of George Floyd's death? In other words, was it a substantial factor? The jury must have struggled with that a little bit, but they didn't send out any notes to the judge about it. So they must have been able to figure it out on their own. And 11 hours, I mean, it is fast for a super high profile case like this. But, you know, the vast majority of cases, and that includes lower level crimes, are much shorter deliberations. So, I mean, that was 11 hours of them sitting in the room together, debating, not as short as really people are making it out to be, but still a significant period of time.
Good point.
I'm intrigued if we'll hear from any of those jurors to learn more about what happened inside that room. Now, Julie, you're a former federal prosecutor. What impact could this verdict have on the upcoming trial of the other 3 officers who are facing aiding and abetting murder and manslaughter charges?
Well, I think it has an impact in a number of ways. First of all, those officers were watching the trial very closely, especially with regard to their role in the event. And I'm sure they're talking to their defense counsel today and possibly the prosecutor soon about whether or not they should be entering some kind of plea. They also do have defenses available to them that Derek Chauvin did not. But, you know, the aiding and abetting law has fairly expansive liability. And if you're found guilty of aiding and abetting, you're punished as if you're the principal. So I'm sure they're paying close attention, as are their lawyers.
Now, Shaq, Derek Chauvin was taken into custody and is now awaiting sentencing again at that prison behind you. We watched yesterday as he was taken out of the courtroom in handcuffs. What can you tell us about when he will be sentenced and how many years in prison could he be facing?
Well, one thing that you noticed in that video of him leaving the courthouse, and even when he was being read the actual verdict, you didn't see much reaction from him. I know it was partially concealed by that mask, but you didn't see much of that visible reaction. But yes, you mentioned he's at the prison behind me, and what we know about his sentencing, that is expected to happen in about 2 months. We know the sentence, you know, we know he was facing up to 40 years in jail, but when you look at the sentencing guidelines for someone like Derek Chauvin, he can be facing or sentenced to a minimum of about 11 years and a maximum of about 15 years. But that changes if prosecutors get what they want. They want to say that there were aggravating factors in Derek Chauvin's murder of George Floyd. They're mentioning, for example, the fact that a 9-year-old was present, the fact that George Floyd was in a vulnerable position. If the prosecution gets what they want and the judge adding on that essentially clause saying that this was that there were aggravating factors involved, then we can see that time potentially double, but we won't know the specific time for a couple of weeks at least, Savannah.
Danny, we have to assume Derek Chauvin will file an appeal. What are his options? And in your opinion, as a defense attorney, does he have a shot at getting any part of this conviction overturned?
Well, you start from the position that when you're defense counsel, all appeals are, in a sense, long shots. But going from there, you have a couple issues. You might have the issue of Maxine Waters and other public statements that were made by officials. This is an issue that is really a kind of long shot because I think a court would have to conclude not only that the jury actually was aware of this, but that it had an effect. And that's a really difficult standard to meet. You might have another avenue of appeal in the final rebuttal argument of the prosecution where they strayed into calling the defense essentially that they were fabricating or making up stories. That might be an appealable issue, too, but they're all long shots.
And Julie, you're a former federal prosecutor, and we now all know, as we've known for almost a year now, that the prosecution had a video to work with. It was the video at the heart of this trial. It's been seen around the world, but we also know that that's not always the case. And even in this particular case, as we mentioned last hour, the original statement from this police department made it sound like quite a different event than what that video showed. How could this verdict affect cases that may not have as much video evidence or be as well known?
Well, first of all, I think it will make people be more skeptical of police testimony in the future. You know, one of the things that defense counsel always have to deal with is that people tend to trust the police. And the more we see these kind of videos and these kind of cases, it kind of chips away at that and puts them on more of an equal par with other witnesses. And when there aren't videos, the prosecution will just deal with it in the same way that they deal with the absence of, for example, DNA evidence in a case where maybe the jury is expecting it. They'll explain what happened and why there wasn't any. But certainly with officers wearing body cameras, we're going to see a lot more videos in trials in the future. And I think hopefully that will bring justice to these situations and to other crimes.
Shaq, Danny, Julie, thank you all so much for your reporting and perspective, not just this morning, but over the past few weeks. We appreciate it.
In a powerful address to the nation Tuesday night,